Welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that many men find confusing, frustrating, and honestly a little controversial. What happens when you don't chase her? She'll think about you nonstop. I know even reading that might make some of you feel uneasy or question if this really works. But stay with me because what I'm about to share comes straight from years of observing human behavior, relationships, and how desire really works. Here's the truth. Most men believe that if they want a woman, they have to chase her relentlessly. They flood her with messages, call constantly, and bend over backwards to show they care. And yet, ironically, what often happens is the opposite. She starts pulling away, loses interest, or takes you for granted. But when a man stops chasing, something unexpected occurs. She begins thinking about him constantly. In my experience as a therapist, I've seen countless situations where the dynamic completely shifts when a man steps back. It's not magic, and it's not manipulation. It's human psychology. When you're always available, her brain never experiences the tension that makes her feel that pull toward you. But when you create space, when you live your life fully without depending on her attention, something powerful happens. She starts noticing your absence. She starts questioning why you're not reaching out. And your presence in her mind grows stronger. I've had clients who told me they felt invisible at first, and then after pulling back, they became unforgettable in her mind. Women often start replaying moments with you, wondering why you're distant and unconsciously analyzing everything about you. That's the power of not chasing. It's controversial because it goes against every traditional dating advice you've ever heard. Most people will tell you to pursue, 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 but the reality is the opposite creates desire. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly why this works, what happens in her mind, and how you can use this dynamic without feeling manipulative or disingenuous. By the end, you'll see that stepping back isn't weakness. It's strategy, psychology, and yes, it's incredibly powerful. One, the psychology of absence of absence. When we talk about relationships, one of the most misunderstood dynamics is the power of absence. Most men think that being present constantly is the way to win her heart. But in reality, absence triggers the most profound psychological responses in a woman's mind. I've seen it countless times in my practice. A man who's always available often fades into the background, while the one who steps back, who creates space, suddenly becomes impossible to stop thinking about. The reason is simple. Human brains crave what they cannot have. There's a term in psychology called reactance, which essentially means that when something feels restricted or out of reach, our desire for it increases. When you stop chasing, when you allow yourself to exist independently without centering her attention as the core of your life, she starts to notice gaps in her own experience. She begins replaying moments with you, wondering why you're not as available as before. That gap, that absence, is what fuels her thoughts and emotions. I've observed this pattern in clients who came to me feeling frustrated and powerless. One man would constantly text, call, and try to fill every space in her life with his presence. She appreciated him, even liked him, but there was no tension, no pull, and ultimately she drifted away emotionally. When he stopped focused on his own life and stopped trying to control her attention, something remarkable happened. He didn't send her long messages or try to explain his absence. He simply lived his life fully. Within days, she began reaching out more, curious, unsettled, and thinking about him in ways she hadn't before. Absence doesn't mean ignoring her or playing games. It's about creating a healthy distance that allows her mind to work. When a woman isn't being chased, her brain starts to take inventory. She recalls conversations, laughs, and moments of connection. She wonders about your choices, your feelings, and what your life looks like without her constantly in the picture. This is where desire is born, not from constant attention, but from space, independence, and the subtle tension that absence creates. The psychology of absence isn't just theory, it's practical. Men who understand this principle stop feeling insecure when they're not the center of her attention. They understand that giving space doesn't mean losing connection. It means allowing attraction to grow naturally, almost without effort. This is why the men who stop chasing often find themselves becoming unforgettable in a woman's mind. She begins to think about them nonstop, analyzing, remembering, and craving interactions, all because of one powerful dynamic: absence. 2. Why chasing kills. Attraction, chasing kills attraction. Most men don't realize it, but chasing actually kills attraction. It's one of the biggest mistakes I see in my practice, and it's counterintuitive because society has conditioned men to believe that persistence equals interest. But desire doesn't work that way. When you chase a woman relentlessly, you're not building connection or admiration. You're creating dependence and predictability. And both of these are unattractive. Think about it. When someone is constantly pursuing you, what do you feel? At first, it might feel flattering, but over time, it becomes expected. Your value diminishes in her mind because she knows she can have access whenever she wants. Desire thrives on uncertainty and challenge, and chasing removes both. I've seen men who thought they were demonstrating care and affection only to have the woman gradually disengage because she never had the chance to truly wonder about them. Chasing communicates one thing, whether consciously or not, that your happiness, your time, and your emotional energy are dependent on her responses. It signals neediness, and the brain registers neediness differently from confidence. It's a turnoff, not a charm point. Women are naturally drawn to men who are centered, who have their own lives, and who can exist fully without seeking constant validation. Chasing flips this dynamic. Suddenly, instead of being the desirable, independent figure in her life, you become someone she doesn't have to think about too much because your attention is always there. I've worked with men who felt powerless because they were chasing every text reply, every invitation, every interaction. Once they understood that chasing diminishes attraction, their whole perspective changed. They stopped flooding her with messages, stopped bending over backward for every sign of interest, and instead focused on their goals, friendships, and passions. What they discovered was fascinating. The woman who seemed distant suddenly started noticing them more. She began initiating conversations, laughing at their jokes, and showing curiosity about their lives. The dynamic flipped completely. The key takeaway is that attraction thrives on tension, mystery, and scarcity, not on constant pursuit. When you stop chasing, you're not playing games. You're allowing her mind to engage naturally. She begins to wonder why you're not pursuing her, what you're doing instead, and what it would feel like if you were fully present in her life, but not available on demand. That mental space you create is where desire grows, where she starts thinking about you nonstop, and where the connection becomes magnetic rather than forced. Chasing doesn't just fail to build attraction, it actively undermines it. Men who understand this principle stop competing for attention and start creating value in themselves. They become men who are remembered, desired, and respected, all without saying a word or proving themselves endlessly. In short, stopping the chase isn't weakness. It's strategy, psychology, and the foundation of lasting attraction. How her mind reacts when you step back. Third, how her mind reacts. When you step back, when you stop chasing, you might think that nothing is happening, that she's moving on or forgetting about you. But in reality, the moment you step back, her mind starts working in ways most men never notice. I've seen it countless times in my practice. Women begin replaying moments, analyzing interactions, and questioning why you're suddenly less available. It's not magic and it's not manipulation, it's pure psychology. Think about it like this: when someone has always been accessible, their presence becomes normal. It's easy to take them for granted. But when that constant accessibility disappears, her brain starts to take notice. She begins to remember conversations, laughs, and even small gestures that may have seemed insignificant at the time. Suddenly, your absence fills a space in her mind that she didn't even realize existed. That mental space is powerful because it creates curiosity, anticipation, and yes, even longing. I've had clients who felt frustrated after stepping back, worried that their silence would be misinterpreted. But almost without fail, the woman starts thinking about them more. She asks herself questions like, why isn't he calling? Or why doesn't he text like he used to? These questions aren't just fleeting thoughts. They're her brain's way of processing the gap you've created. She begins to analyze everything about you, your behavior, your words, even your personality. That analysis strengthens her connection to you because the more she thinks, the more emotional energy she invests in you. Another reaction I often see is nostalgia. Women start remembering the moments when you made them laugh, when you challenged them, or when you didn't try to impress, but simply existed with confidence. That nostalgia isn't forced, it's natural. Your absence allows her mind to filter through the memories without the distraction of constant attention. This is where desire grows silently, almost invisibly, until it becomes irresistible. The most fascinating part is that she often starts seeking subtle ways to reconnect, even unconsciously. She may engage more on social media, reply to your messages differently, or bring up topics that remind her of you. She's not being manipulative. She's reacting to the psychological pull your absence created. The moment you stop chasing, you shift from being ordinary and predictable to rare and intriguing. Stepping back also allows her to see your independence. When a man is not constantly available, it signals confidence, self-respect, and value. These traits naturally make a man more attractive because they suggest he is not defined by her attention or approval. Her mind notices this shift, and she begins to associate you with qualities she desires but cannot control. Understanding how her mind reacts when you step back is crucial for any man who wants to create attraction without chasing. It's subtle, it's powerful, and it works because it taps into human psychology rather than manipulation. When you stop chasing, you're not losing her. You're allowing her mind to discover you in a way that constant attention could never achieve. The role of mystery in Desire 4. The role of mystery in desire. One of the most powerful tools in attraction and one most men overlook is mystery. I remember working with a client who was in a relationship that had started to feel routine. He was attentive, always available, and yet over time she seemed distant. She wasn't unhappy, but the spark that had been there at the beginning had dimmed. He was confused, frustrated, and even anxious. This is where mystery comes into play, and why stepping back can reignite interest in ways chasing never can. Mystery isn't about hiding who you are or being deceptive. It's about maintaining a sense of independence and unpredictability. In this client's case, he realized that he had been giving too much too soon. He knew all of her routines, checked in constantly, and adjusted his schedule to match hers. She appreciated it, yes, but her mind had no reason to wonder about him. There was nothing new, nothing intriguing, and no tension to keep her thinking. When he consciously decided to step back and focus on his own life, something subtle but powerful happened. He didn't change who he was, but he stopped being constantly available. He invested more in his own passions, hobbies, and friendships. She began to notice small shifts. He seemed more confident, more self-assured, and less predictable. Suddenly, the mundane moments of their relationship became sparks for curiosity. She wondered what he was doing, who he was spending time with, and even what he thought about certain things. The mystery wasn't manufactured. It emerged naturally because he wasn't chasing, controlling, or oversharing. This is exactly what makes mystery so compelling. Human brains are wired to pay attention to what's uncertain. When a man is predictable, a woman's brain processes him as safe, familiar, and easy to access. That's comfortable, but not magnetic. But when a man maintains mystery by living fully without needing constant validation or approval, she starts thinking about him without even realizing it. She recalls conversations, moments, and subtle behaviors that she hadn't paid much attention to before. That mental replay builds desire because it engages her emotions, curiosity, and imagination all at once. In my experience, mystery also deepens connection. When this client stopped chasing, their conversations changed. She became more engaged, laughed more, and even initiated contact at times. He didn't manipulate her. He simply allowed space for her to notice him in a new light. The attraction returned not through effort, but through absence, independence, and the natural intrigue that emerges when a man is fully himself without needing to be constantly available. Mystery, then, is not about being distant for the sake of it. It's about preserving your value, your independence, and your sense of self. When a man does this, women notice, they think, and they crave. The spark that chasing extinguishes can be reignited simply by creating the space for curiosity, intrigue, and genuine desire to flourish. 5. Subtle signals. She picks up. Subtle signals. She picks up. One of the most fascinating things I've observed as a therapist is how women pick up on subtle signals when a man stops chasing them. These aren't dramatic gestures or grand declarations. They're small, almost imperceptible cues that tell her you've shifted your energy, and they have a profound effect on her mind. I remember working with a client in a relationship where he had always been overly attentive. He would check in constantly, respond immediately to texts, and adjust his plans to match hers. She appreciated the attention, but over time, it stopped exciting her. She had no reason to wonder or miss him because he was always there. When he began to step back, the subtle signals he was sending completely changed the way she perceived him. For instance, he stopped responding immediately to every text. He didn't ignore her or play games, but he let his own life take priority, his work, hobbies, and personal growth. Suddenly, she noticed a difference. She realized that he had a life beyond her, and that was magnetic. Women are wired to pay attention to what is independent and self-contained. Those subtle signals of autonomy naturally draw interest. Another signal she picked up was the calm confidence he projected. Before, he had been anxious about her responses, almost trying to earn her attention. Once he stopped chasing, his body language, tone, and presence communicated that he wasn't desperate for approval. She sensed that confidence immediately. It's subtle, but it's incredibly powerful. She didn't hear it as words. She felt it in the way he carried himself, how he spoke, and how he engaged when they interacted. Even his laughter and casual remarks started to have more impact. Because he wasn't chasing, the moments they shared became more meaningful. She noticed the way he could tease her lightly, make a comment that reflected his interests, or remain playful without needing validation. These small cues told her something profound. He was valuable, confident, and not defined by her attention. That's the type of energy that makes a woman start thinking about a man constantly. Finally, the subtle signals extended to the way he created space in the relationship. He didn't overshare or try to explain his absence. He simply lived fully, and she noticed. The more he embraced his own independence, the more she reflected on the connection they shared. Small actions like focusing on his hobbies, engaging with friends, or being fully present in moments without trying to impress her sent signals of self-respect and intrigue that words alone could never convey. The lesson here is clear. Attraction is less about grand gestures and more about these subtle signals. Women notice when a man, women, stops chasing because it communicates independence, confidence, and value. These cues, often unconscious, trigger thought patterns in her mind that lead to curiosity, reflection, and ultimately desire. Sixth, maintaining. Maintaining your own life, your own life. One of the most common mistakes men make in relationships is losing themselves in the process of trying to gain a woman's attention. I've seen it countless times in my practice. A man who was once independent, confident, and driven becomes consumed by the relationship, constantly adjusting his life to fit hers. He believes that being present 24/7 will make her love him more. The truth, however, is the exact opposite. When you lose sight of your own life, you lose the magnetic energy that initially drew her to you. Maintaining your own life is not just about having hobbies or a career. It's about being fully engaged in yourself, in your growth, and in your experiences. I once worked with a client who had been chasing his partner for months. He canceled plans with friends, skipped workouts, and constantly texted her just to feel connected. She began to take him for granted. The spark faded because he had made himself predictable and available at all times. When he consciously decided to reclaim his life, everything changed. He reestablished boundaries, pursued his passions, and invested in his personal growth. He wasn't doing it to get her attention or manipulate her. He simply prioritized himself. Almost immediately, she noticed a shift. She saw him as a man with direction, ambition, and independence, qualities that naturally create attraction. His life became richer, and by extension, his presence in hers became more powerful. Maintaining your own life also builds emotional resilience. When you aren't dependent on her validation, her moods, or her attention, you stay centered regardless of what's happening in the relationship. This stability is magnetic because it communicates confidence and self-sufficiency. Women are instinctively drawn to men who have their own identity and don't need constant reassurance to feel valuable. The more you live fully in your own world, the more space you create for her curiosity and desire to grow naturally. Another benefit of maintaining your own life is that it preserves your sense of mystery. When she sees that you are engaged in your world and not constantly chasing her, she begins to notice gaps. Moments when she wonders what you're doing, who you're with, and what drives you. That curiosity fuels attraction in a way chasing never could. She begins thinking about you even when you're not around, replaying interactions, and imagining experiences she could share with you. Ultimately, maintaining your own life is not just a strategy, it's a mindset. It's about valuing yourself, protecting your energy, and creating a life that's rich and fulfilling on its own. When you do this, you stop being dependent on her attention, and instead you become someone she cannot stop thinking about. Her mind fills with questions, memories, and intrigue, and the attraction deepens naturally. In essence, living your own life is the single most powerful way to make her think about you nonstop without chasing, without drama, and without forcing it. 7. Turning her thoughts, turning her thoughts into action. By the time you reach this stage, something powerful has already happened. When you stop chasing, created space, and focused on your own life, her mind has been working, often without her even realizing it. She's been replaying your conversations, recalling your presence, and feeling the subtle tension of your absence. But thinking about you nonstop isn't enough. The final piece of the puzzle is understanding how those thoughts can naturally turn into action without forcing or manipulating her. I've seen this pattern repeatedly in my practice. One client, after stepping back and living fully in his own world, noticed a dramatic shift in his partner's behavior. She started initiating conversations, suggesting meetups, and even teasing him in ways she hadn't before. What had triggered this change? It wasn't words or grand gestures. It was the combination of his absence, independence, and the subtle signals he had sent that created curiosity, desire, and emotional investment. Her mind had been working overtime, and eventually that mental energy translated into action. The key here is patience and consistency. If you chase again the moment she shows interest, you undo all the progress. Women respond to patterns, not momentary gestures. By remaining grounded, confident, and fully engaged in your own life, you signal that your value isn't dependent on her attention. This creates a dynamic where she wants to engage with you on your terms rather than you bending to hers. Her thoughts about you are no longer passive. They start influencing her behavior because she senses that connection is meaningful but not guaranteed. Another important factor is subtle reinforcement. Small interactions like light humor, thoughtful comments, or engaging without over-explaining keep her mind active. You don't have to chase or convince her. You simply show up as a man who is interesting, confident, and self-contained. Women naturally respond to energy rather than words. When she feels your energy is consistent, strong, and independent, her thoughts start manifesting as actions, texts, calls, invitations, or deeper engagement in the relationship. What's fascinating is that this process feels almost effortless. You're not controlling her behavior. You're allowing her natural curiosity, emotional investment, and desire to guide her actions. She begins seeking you out, not because she's being pressured, but because her mind has been pulled into the tension you created through absence and independence. Her thoughts turn into action organically, and the dynamic of the relationship shifts from pursuit to mutual interest. In essence, Turning her thoughts into action is the final step in the subtle but powerful journey you've created. By stepping back, living your own life, and maintaining independence, you allow attraction to grow naturally. Her mental energy, fueled by curiosity and desire, starts influencing real world behavior. You no longer have to chase. She seeks you out because the connection has become magnetic, meaningful, and undeniable. When done correctly, this is the ultimate outcome. She's thinking about you nonstop. And now those thoughts are translating into tangible actions that strengthen the bond between conclusion you. In the end, stopping the chase isn't about playing games. It's about understanding psychology, valuing yourself, and creating natural attraction. When you focus on your life, maintain independence, and allow space, her mind starts working in ways you can't force. She notices your confidence, remembers your presence, and begins thinking about you nonstop. Those thoughts eventually turn into action because curiosity and desire have been sparked naturally. Attraction thrives on tension, mystery, and independence, not constant pursuit. By stepping back and living fully, you become unforgettable, magnetic, and genuinely desirable without ever having to chase.